Hi everyone, my name is Amber, welcome back to my channel. This is my January wrap up. So I read 11 full books in January and I'm also currently in the middle of 3, which I'm also hoping to finish in the next day or so. It's currently nearing the end of January as I'm recording this, but I'm not quite there yet, so I do have time and I think I can finish all of these books. So let's get started. My first read of the year was a reread, and that was Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. I was reading this as part of the Last Read book club. Like I said, this is a reread for me. I read it 2 years ago and I loved it then and I loved it now. So I gave this 4.5 stars. It's the middle book in the Scythe trilogy. It's absolutely fantastic. It, as a series, tackles a lot of philosophical questions, like what would humans do if we conquered death? What would happen if we stopped aging? What would the political structure look like? What would technological advancement look like? Would there be any at all? Things like that. It's very, very interesting. I think it asks a lot of deep questions, especially for YA as well. I think this is a kind of dystopian book that does dystopian right, in my opinion. It's not just all action scenes where the main characters are trying to escape a walled city. It asks you some really intense questions and makes you think. So I loved this book, gave it 4.5 stars, and I would reread it again in the future. My next read was Stolen by Lucy Christopher, which was a book that had been sat on my shelf for the longest time. I bought this book I think in 2010, 2011. I'm going to be doing a full video on this one and a couple of other books that I'm going to be mentioning in this wrap up, because I'm talking about booktube history and kind of the books that shaped booktube and how these books would shape up today if they came out now. So I'm really glad that I finally took the time to read this one. I did only give it 3 stars. That doesn't mean that I hated the book, I just didn't love it. 3 stars for me means that I liked the book. So Stolen is about a young girl whose name I can't remember, who gets abducted from an airport and taken to the outback in Australia, and she's writing letters to her captor. I did initially struggle to get used to the second person writing style, but once I did, I quickly got into the story. What I really liked about this one was that Lucy Christopher didn't waste any time on kind of flowery prose or description, and that's kind of true to life because this main character is writing letters and she's not going to go into too much detail about like the sun reflecting off the glowing sand of the outback and stuff like that. I did find this book to be very tense, which is what you want in a contemporary thriller. I will say that I was expecting it to be a bit worse or a lot darker. I kept waiting for something really awful to happen to Gemma, and obviously abduction is awful, but I was expecting something more graphic, and that didn't happen. I think if this book were to be written nowadays it would, but I'm going to talk about that more in my upcoming video about this book and 2 others. I have also just learned that there will be a sequel to this book coming out this year actually, so this was really good timing for me to read. And then I don't really know what came over me, but I decided to read House of Earth and Blood, the first book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J Maas. I gave this one 4 stars and I read it in just I think 5 days. I did read it super quickly despite the size, and I've done a full review on this, so I won't waffle on too much here. If you want to know my more in-depth thoughts, go and check out my review. I found it very fast-paced, very engaging. It didn't feel like I was reading an 800-page book. It honestly felt like it was flying by, which was really, really good. That's what you want from a book this size. I did find the beginning to be a little bit info dumpy, the first 150 pages or so. It was just full-on world building and setup. And again, you kind of expect that from a book this size, but I feel like the book could have been condensed a bit more and not be as long and then still cover a lot of the same things. I didn't like that Sarah J Maas recycled lines from her Throne of Glass series word for word and used them on a different character. I did not like that at all. I don't think it was meant to be like a throwback for her previous characters. I think it was meant to be like a dramatic moment, but instead it just annoyed me and made the lines in the other series feel quite cheap. So I wasn't a fan of that. Knocked a star off for that, and also it's not an all-time favourite. It's just a really fun urban fantasy read with fallen angels, werewolves, shifters, fae. Of course there's fae in there. There's also a really cute mermaid as well. Next I read a book that I had to return to the library, and that was How to Kill Your Family. I gave this one 3 stars. So this one is a book about a bastard child of a billionaire who sets out to get revenge because her father has never paid for any of her upbringing, and so she decides to kill her entire family. I didn't love this one. I did read it in a day because I was flying through it, but that's because it was such an easy read. It didn't feel very deep or intense or anything despite the subject matter. I did think that the commentary on influencers was entertaining as a book influencer, booktuber myself, so that part was fun. Overall it was just like a fun book, and I probably will forget about it in a few years, but it was alright. Then I read a 1-star book, and that was Generation Dead. This is another one that I'm reading for my kind of booktube history project. I hated it. Honestly, it was so poorly written. I don't think I would have enjoyed it back in the day either, so it's a shame that I spent my money on it. So this one's set in the USA in a high school, and in the USA, teenagers who die come back to life as zombies, and zombies are kind of being brought back into society, and the zombies have to go to high school, and that's basically the entire plot. I definitely feel like it was trying to capitalise on the YA zombie trend, but going more contemporary rather than horror, which I feel like was a mistake because there wasn't really any plot there. I also feel like the author was trying to make a commentary on race and immigration, but having read what he wrote, I'm not sure he's really the correct person to do so. So yeah, didn't love it. Next, I read Not a Happy Family by Shari Lapina, which is an adult thriller book. This one I found very average. I gave it 3 stars, and that seems to be the case for most of Shari Lapina's works for me now. I did really like her first couple of books, but to me now she's just recycling the same sort of format over and over again, and it seemed like she was bored while writing this one. So I enjoyed it. Like I said, gave it 3 stars, but it was nothing special. This is a thriller book about a group of adult siblings whose parents are killed and they're set to inherit the money. So you're wondering whether one of the siblings killed the parents or if someone from outside the family killed them and thought they were going to get something in one of the wills, but they didn't. I'm now wondering if it's time to give up on Shari Lapina because I'm not loving their writing. But a book that I did love and adore was Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This is my first 5-star read of the year and I adored it with my whole heart. So this one is initially set in the 70s. It was written in the 70s as well. And it's about a main character called Dana who gets sucked back in time to 1815, where she has to save her white ancestor from dying. And this keeps happening over and over again. She doesn't know when she's going to get dragged back in time. She doesn't know if she's going to be able to take anyone with her or bring anyone back. So first of all, I love time travel stuff. I love everything to do with it. I love it when you go forward or backwards in time, or if there's some sort of like parallel universe thing going on. I love that so much, and I love thinking about the consequences of their actions, whether they do travel through time. So Dana obviously goes back to 1815 and she feels like she has to save her white ancestor whose family owns a plantation in the south, because otherwise she might not be born, but that also means that she has to kind of support this white slave owning family. So it's a bit of a conundrum, and to be honest, I think Octavia E. Butler pulled it off flawlessly. There was one minor criticism that I had, and it is partly addressed in this book, but to me it didn't really feel like Dana was like thinking about saving anyone else. She found that she was able to take people forward or backwards in time with her if they were touching her, and she didn't try to take any of the black people who were being held in slavery with her when she was going forward in time. Like I said, it is partly addressed and it's a very minor criticism of it, but I feel like the thought could have at least crossed her mind. Honestly, I felt like this book could have been written in the modern day. It was very it was very modern and very relevant to our times as well, which is cool but also kind of scary. I really enjoyed this one and I can't wait to check out more of her books. When I'm next able to buy books, I think I'm going to buy Parable of the Sower because that one sounds so good. Then I read Local Woman Missing, which is another adult thriller. This is by Mary Kubica, I don't know how to pronounce the name, whose previous book, I can't remember the name of it, The Other Misses, I think I did read before, and I enjoyed that one. I gave that 3 stars. I gave this one 3.5 because it was slightly better. It wasn't anything amazing, I wouldn't say. I won't talk about the plot too much, but basically it jumps around in time. At one point in the past, 2 women are killed or go missing, and then a child also goes missing too. And then jump forward in time and that child is found, but the women aren't. And you start to uncover more and more things about this mystery as the girl is returned to her father and brother. I had a few issues with this one, but I did quite like the pacing of it and the mystery itself. Apart from towards the end, I feel like it didn't really come out of nowhere. There were just some things that were a bit off for me and it just didn't really feel like a gratifying ending. I can't really talk much about it without going into spoilers, but there were some things that didn't really make sense to do with the twist, so that was a bit frustrating. I also made my friend Kayla read this like right after I did so that we could talk about it, and she felt the same way. Next I read Tunnel of Bones by V.E. Schwab. This is the second book in their middle grade series, which I believe is called Cassidy Blake. I listened to this one as an audiobook and I gave it 4 stars. I don't really have much to say about it. Basically it's about a young girl called Cassidy who can see ghosts, and she's meant to be helping them sort of pass through the veil because they're trapped on Earth, and in this one she goes to Paris and into the catacombs. It's fun. I'm going to carry on with the series probably later this year. Then I read Anxious People, which I gave 4 stars, probably 4.5 maybe, I'm not quite sure. So this one is, you've probably heard of it, it's very popular. It's set in Sweden and there's a bank robber holding people hostage in an apartment because they're there for an apartment viewing. And it's basically about all of these people who are at the viewing getting to know one another, and then us finding out more about them and people coming together, and it's actually really lovely. It sounds a bit like a thriller book, but it's more of a literary fiction, heartwarming story that will probably make you cry. It made me tear up. My partner's reading it now and he's already teared up a couple of times as well. I have seen some reviews of this one that said that the writing was emotionally manipulative, which I think is a very strange way of describing any book really, because writing books is meant to manipulate the reader. But the whole point of this book was kind of going on the journey of thinking that people, the characters, were basically all a bunch of idiots, and then getting to know them and realizing actually my first impression of them was not correct, and like the characters with each other kind of coming to understand them and treat them how they deserve to be treated. I really enjoyed the mystery of this one. I loved the few twists that there were. I did start to catch on a little bit, but it's not a thriller, so it's not meant to be like super twisty, and overall I love the commentary, so I gave this one 4 stars. And then the last book that I actually finished, not the ones I'm currently in the middle of, was Iron Widow, which I gave 2 stars. I really didn't enjoy this one. I think the hype got to me on this one, and I was just very confused by all of the marketing. So first of all, it's described as a feminist book, and to me this wasn't feminist at all. My friend Carrie did describe it as pre-feminist, which could be a thing. I'm just not sure the author can pull that off necessarily, because I don't think it was written very well. So I could have done with a bit more description. A lot more world building I think was necessary, because I was just mainly confused, and the action scenes were also really confusing. It felt like this book was kind of rushed through the whole process. I don't know when the author worked on this, whether it was during COVID or not, but it felt like it needed a bit more fine-tuning and a lot more detail put in here, because it felt like the beginning of a sci-fi thought, if that makes sense. I really did like the portrayal of polyamory though. That was handled really, really well, and while I didn't really ship anyone because I didn't really care about any of the characters, I really liked the representation that was in there, and it didn't make me cringe, which was good, because quite often romance in books, especially YA, which I believe this book is, but again the marketing is confusing. What was I saying? Yeah, the romances often made me cringe, and it was actually really good in this one. I do think it was a little bit insta-lovey saying that, but it wasn't anything kind of in your face and over the top. It wasn't Twilight levels of insta-love, so that was good. There was also quite often a very weird description of a nipple eye, which I did not appreciate. Didn't like that at all. It was unnecessary, and I don't know why it was in there. So yeah, I didn't like this. I probably wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but clearly a lot of people do love it, so if you think that it sounds like your kind of thing, then please do check it out. Don't just take my word for it. It's just not something that I would recommend to readers like me. And then I'm in the middle of 3 books, which I'm hoping to finish in the next couple of days. So first of all, we have Wicked Lovely, which is a paranormal fairy story. I say I'm in the middle, but I'm actually 11 pages in, but I do need to finish this one in the next few hours, because I need to carry on doing my booktube history video, which is what this is a part of. I'm almost done rereading The Toll. I'm probably going to give this one 5 stars. I love it. This is the 3rd book in the Arc of the Scythe trilogy. Loved it the first time, love it even more the second time, and yeah, so I'm flying through it. It's 600 pages. I'm currently on page 400, so not got much to go. And then the next one and the last one that I need to finish this month before Tuesday, so the day that you're watching this, is The Night Watchman, which is a historical fiction book which is very, very popular. I'm not very far in. I'm going to have to start again because I started it ages ago, and I'm actually reading this as part of my workbook club, so I need to get it read. But this is about, I don't really know what it's about, so I'm not going to try to describe it. I keep getting it wrong whenever I try to. So I'm going to hopefully read this, and I'm hoping to give it 5 stars because I've heard that it's really, really good. So those are the, 14 books that I wanted to talk about in this January wrap up. It was a very good reading month overall. I really, really enjoyed myself. There were only a couple of flops and a couple of disappointments, mainly looking at Iron Widow. I don't know if you've seen my February TBR yet, but I am trying to read 28 books in 28 days in February, so hopefully that's also a good reading month. Wish me luck. Let me know what your favourite book of January was in the comments below, and I'll speak to you all in the next video. Bye!